All right, gang, welcome back. Yesterday, or in the last lesson, we talked about economic unions just briefly, and today we're going to focus on the effects of the unequal distribution of resources throughout the world. Now, the sort of obvious effect here is that obviously we've got to trade, but we're going to talk about some specific examples of why we trade or how we trade and how this affects countries throughout the world. So the first thing is, the number one effect or first effect of unequal distribution is that some countries are rather interdependent on countries. Okay, we've got to be reliant on other countries. That's what interdependence is. For example, the U.S. is dependent on oil, actually used to be, dependent on oil from other countries. Now, you might say, oh, we get most of it from the Middle East, but actually most of the oil that we import comes from Canada and Mexico. That's the primary place or the number one location in most of the oil that we get that we're not producing. Now, this information has changed a little bit over the last 4 years or so, but we still do have to import some oil, but right now we are also producing a lot. The largest reserves or sources of oil in the world are in Southwest Asia, particularly in Saudi Arabia. They have the largest oil reserves in the country. Another effect of the unequal distribution of resources is uneven economic development. You'll recall that we have said that some countries are developed and some are developing. And one of the reasons of this change or uneven distribution of development is because of those distribution of resources. Developed countries typically have more resources. Developing countries do not. For example, the U.S. Is one of the most developed countries in the world, and we have a plethora of natural resources. And that's what's allowed us to become the powerful nation that we are, is simply because we have more resources, natural resources, than other countries. Unequal distribution has also resulted in what we'll call energy producers and energy consumers. By energy producers, I mean people that produce energy resources. Petroleum being number one, natural gas being another one. Those are people. Those are things that make energy. In some places are energy producers, and some are consumers. The U.S. and China use a lot of energy, and because of that, we often have to trade for it. China, in particular, does not produce as much oil as it consumes today, and so we have to trade for it, or they have to trade for it. Some other examples, there's some other things that have resulted in the unequal distribution of resources are imperialism. Imperialism is the desire of one country to take over another, okay? And it's so largely so that they can have those resources. The late 1800s or the 1800s saw European countries taking over Africa because Europeans needed resources, and they got those resources from Africa and said, hey, we're better than you, we're going to come in and we're going to take your stuff. And there's not a whole lot the African nations could do about it at that point. Another cause is, well, obviously, there's often conflict over control of the resources. This is one of the main causes of conflict over in the world. And that's, for example, there's a lot of conflict in Southeast Asia or Southwest Asia, mostly or at least partially because of oil. So it also helps to dictate how we use land. Resources also dictate how we use land. And the decisions that we make based on this have everything to do with our country. Okay? Economic activities that require a lot of land have to obviously have more open spaces, and there are some that require a limited or smaller area. And we've got to mesh those two things together. And here's what I mean by that. Agriculture takes a lot of land. Here in Augusta County, we are the largest county in the state of Virginia by terms of land. Okay, we're almost as big as the entire state of Rhode Island. And the reason for that is that our county is agriculturally based. Now, the eastern part of the county, where we live here in Stewart's Draft, is becoming more of a manufacturing center. And because we're becoming more of a manufacturing center, we don't need those big, giant tracts of farmland. And so that's been a little bit of a change. Land use, in terms of going together, you've got to find land uses that are compatible with each other and ones that aren't compatible with each other. The easiest example is open spaces like farmland go really well with houses. Around here in Stewart's Draft, you sometimes have subdivisions right next to farms. Okay, and those go well together because farms don't really pollute. They may smell a little if you don't like the smell of cow manure, but they really are compatible with each other, you can have them next to each other. On the other hand, landfills cannot go next to a residential area because of the dangers that you have there. Okay? The use of resources really depends on the country itself. It depends on the culture, what they hold is important. It depends on how much technology they have and how they have access. And it also has to do with what the government's priorities are. The United States, one of the number one conflicts in the United States right now in our government is the priority of economic development versus environmental protection. And you see those two things in conflict over things like here in Augusta County, the pipeline controversy. You see those things in conflict over the pipeline that they're discussing, putting through the middle of the United States. And so those are some of the issues. It's called the Keystone Pipeline. And so those are some of the issues that we fight with. Now, sometimes priorities change over time. And often levels of economic development, as we all know, vary from country to country, but even within a country, economic development can vary. China is an excellent example of this. China, the eastern portion of China, is very highly developed. Their cities are as modern or as nice as anything in the United States. But their rural areas are often much less developed than their urban areas. And so economic development can vary from place to place. And that's largely to do with the resources that are available. Now, what are some things that influence how we use resources? Well, there are some social and economic influences that we're going to talk about. Some countries have really high economic development priorities. For example, the U.S. economic development, money is a really high priority. People having jobs, people working, protecting, making sure that businesses are making money and those businesses are able to employ lots of people so that we can spend money. That's a really high priority. On the other hand, the other way to look at it is some places are more conservative and want to conserve their environment. Europe is an example of this. Their protection of their environment is very high priority. And there are even political parties in Europe called green parties that are entirely based on the protection of the environment. Now, we have green parties in the U.S. as well, but they are not nearly as powerful, as influential as those that are in Europe. Also, oftentimes you have to look at the priorities of the indigenous minorities. And what I mean by that are the Aboriginal people, the natives that are in an area. In the United States, we have Native Americans. In Canada, they have Inuit. And often, when a government is making decisions, you have to consider their culture and their customs in the background and what to do with them. The indigenous people mean simply people that are native to an area. And along those same lines, Canada takes into high account, it's a high priority, how it develops its land based on native traditions. Greenland is another example of a place that takes into account those people when they're making economic decisions. Often new technologies create demand for resources, and that's one of the important things to know is that new technologies create a really high demand for certain resources. The steam engine created a high demand for coal. When the steam engine was invented, now coal became in demand. The steam engine was created in England, and the reason it was created in England was and flourished in England was because coal was a common source of energy in England. The internal combustion engine, like we have in our cars, created a new demand for what? Petroleum. All right? Our cars and trucks demand gasoline, and so we use oil in our cars and trucks. And so we've got a lot of that. And so an increase in demand and an increase for oil means an increase in the importance of the countries that have oil. Last but not least, computer chips require a new resource, and that's skilled labor. Computer chips and the creation of technology, electronic technology through computer chips or iPhones or iPads or whatever, creates a new demand for highly skilled labor that can put together and piece together those things. All right, so that's a short lesson. We're going to combine all those things together in class, but we're going to just leave that as a short lesson right now on the distribution of resources and how it affects our land use and decisions that we make. So in the next lesson, we'll talk about more about the unequal distribution of resources. But for right now, we'll stop there. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys later. But wait, there's more. I had to tack this on. I forgot about this. This is a problem when you make videos and you don't plan ahead too much. We've got to talk about the costs or the benefits and negatives of resource use. I can't believe I forgot this. So in your notebooks, those of you that that are doing this outside of class, I want you to divide this part of your notebook into half, and you're going to put costs, or good things, or bad things rather, and benefits of resource usage. So let's talk about this real quick. This shouldn't take us more than a couple minutes. But one, negative of using resources, that obviously they're gone. Once coal is gone, it's gone forever. Once petroleum is gone, it's gone forever. The benefits of this is that you produce goods and services, and in the production of goods and services, you get stuff. You get oil. You get steel from the use of coal. You get all sorts of stuff from using resources. And what you're going to get out of using the resources, is that more important than what you're going to lose? Negatives: environmental degradation, okay, pollution, acid rain, oil spills are all negatives to using resources. Here in Augusta County, they're talking about building the pipeline through Augusta County. A lot of people are really worried about environmental degradation to our agrarian county, and they don't want to see our countryside torn apart by that pipeline. On the other hand, you get employment opportunities. You've got to have people to go get the resources, so you're going to have people there. Jobs are created. Coal mining jobs are created when we mine for coal. For the pipeline here in Augusta County, jobs are going to be created in building the pipeline. And so it's going to bring people to Augusta County to build the pipeline. Now, are those jobs permanent? Are they going to be here for a long time? We don't know. Okay? But it's going to bring people into the county to build the pipeline itself. The negative, again, is that you get pollution, acid rain, and oil spills. More negative: you can often get health problems from using resources. Coal is the #1 example of health problems. You get lung issues, black lung. Often, if the pipeline bursts, for example, it could affect our drinking water. If the pipeline bursts, it could cause other issues if natural gas is spilled in our county. But again, the positives of, we are able to develop technology. And this technology makes it easier to get things out of the ground. One of the current ways that we in the United States get resources out of the ground, oil or petroleum, is called fracking, hydraulic fracturing. That makes stuff, the development of that technology in the late 2000s made it available, or made us able to become more energy independent, because we can now pull it out of the ground. The negative to it is, well, we often are being accused, those that do frack are being accused of causing earthquakes. Fracking is being caused of getting into the drinking water and creating bad water for people. So those are some of the costs and the benefits of using resources. And countries have to make decisions based on those priorities that I said earlier: environmental protection versus economic opportunity. Here in the U.S., we want to employ people. We want to have lots of economic opportunity. On the other hand, those people in other parts of the world, Europe, for example, want to protect their environment. All right? So that'll end this lesson. Now it's actually over. Goodbye.